Let's get started with our first news. Dana White has admitted that security will be one of the biggest challenges for the upcoming UFC White House card. In a recent update, he revealed that things are moving forward quickly after an initial meeting with former President Trump. Dana explained that he and his team went to the White House last week to present their renderings and ideas for how the event might look. According to Dana, Trump loved what he saw and gave them the green light to move ahead. With that approval, Dana says the work is now in full swing, and planning has officially begun. However, Dana made it clear that security will be a major issue. He recalled his last visit to the White House, describing the heavy protection surrounding the area. He mentioned going up on the roof of the White House and seeing snipers armed with .50 caliber rifles positioned across the rooftop. Dana said the experience was pretty crazy and served as a reminder of how serious the safety protocols are at one of the most heavily guarded locations in the world. Now, with the UFC preparing to host an event on the White House lawn, Dana admits that balancing the needs of the crowd with the job of the Secret Service will not be easy. Their number one responsibility is to protect the president, and that raises huge questions about how to safely organize an event of this magnitude. Dana stressed that the crowd will be limited to under 5,000 people, which is far smaller than a typical UFC event, but even with those restrictions, it is still an incredibly complicated task. Dana's comments highlight just how unprecedented this event will be. The idea of bringing UFC to the White House lawn is unlike anything the organization has done before. It combines the spectacle of MMA with one of the most iconic and secure locations on the planet. While Trump's enthusiasm and approval have given the project momentum, the real challenge now falls on the logistics team, who must figure out how to make the event both safe and successful. Dana sounded both excited and cautious, knowing that every detail will have to be perfect to pull this off. The UFC has always been about pushing boundaries and creating unforgettable moments, but hosting a fight card at the White House could easily be its most ambitious move yet. Dana's focus on security makes it clear that while the vision is bold, the execution must be flawless. Before moving to the next news, we have one quick request for you. We're constantly working on improving our content to earn your love and support. That's why we'd truly appreciate it if you could take just a moment to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update. Move on to another news. Ilya had quite the exchange with Terence Crawford over the weekend, and it quickly caught the attention of both MMA and boxing fans. The story began when Ilya ran into Crawford and things escalated from there. After their interaction, Ilya didn't hold back, making it clear that if the two ever met inside a boxing ring, he would dominate. He wrote a bold statement saying he wouldn't even bother discussing what would happen inside the octagon, because that was obvious. Instead, he focused on boxing, declaring, "I put him to sleep in the very first contact." Those words immediately set off waves across combat sports, as fans debated the matchup and Crawford himself took notice. Crawford didn't stay silent. He responded directly to Ilya's post with a sharp remark, dismissing the featherweight champion's confidence. Crawford said, "That dude's drunk. A lot of MMA guys, they drink a lot, so he must have been on that alcohol that day." His comment was short but stinging, meant to brush off Ilya's call-out as nothing more than nonsense fueled by too much alcohol. It didn't take long before Ilya addressed Crawford's response. At a press conference, he calmly but firmly fired back. Ilya made it clear that he had no personal reaction to what Crawford said. He explained that he doesn't really care about the insult, but he's always ready for a challenge. He stated, whenever he wants to measure himself, whenever he wants to test his technique and his skills, I'm here to show him. His words carried confidence, not only in himself but also in what MMA fighters bring to the table when stepping into other arenas like boxing. Ilya also expressed some frustration at the recent trend of boxers taking verbal shots at MMA fighters. He explained that what bothers him most is how so many boxers have been criticizing the MMA world and trying to belittle the athletes who compete there. He pointed out that countless MMA fighters have already tested themselves in boxing, stepping into that sport to prove their skills under a different rule set. From Conor's legendary fight against Floyd Mayweather, to others who have tried their hand in the squared circle, MMA fighters have repeatedly crossed over, but Ilya highlighted a very important point. Despite all the talk from boxers, very few of them have ever actually had the courage to step inside the octagon and test themselves in MMA. Ilya's message was clear and unapologetic. he's not backing down from anyone. And if Crawford or any other boxer truly wants to challenge him, he's more than ready. He said plainly, "Whoever wants it, I'm here." That statement solidified his stance, showing that his confidence isn't just empty words. He believes in his power, his technique, and his ability to compete with the best, no matter the sport. This back and forth between Ilya and Crawford has sparked even more conversations about crossover fights. While the possibility of the two ever actually meeting in the ring remains uncertain, one thing is clear: Ilya isn't intimidated. He's calling out some of the biggest names in boxing and making it known that he's ready to step up at any moment. For fans, it's another reminder of why combat sports are so exciting. The lines between MMA and boxing continue to blur, and moments like this only fuel the anticipation for what could be the next big crossover showdown. Move on to another news. Armen has found himself in a very strange position lately, and fans are starting to notice. After failing to secure his long-awaited title shot against Islam, he's been making moves that many people consider confusing. Instead of staying focused on climbing back to the top, he recently agreed to a grappling match with Gamrot, the same fighter he previously refused to face inside the UFC. What makes this even more puzzling is that Armen himself admitted that the UFC offered him Gamrot, but he turned it down because he wanted someone ranked higher. The issue with that decision is obvious. Gamrot already owns a win over Armen, which makes rejecting the fight look even worse in the eyes of fans and the promotion. Rather than bouncing back with momentum, Armen's pattern of turning down fights has raised questions about his strategy. His refusal to fight Gamrot inside the octagon, only to later accept a grappling match with him, didn't sit well with many people. To make things more interesting, Gamrot revealed in a recent interview with Inside Fighting that he was the one who ultimately turned down the grappling match. According to him, the UFC fight has to come first before anything else. Gamrot explained that he received an offer from a grappling organization, and Armen had already said yes to it. The organizers were waiting on Gamrot's answer, but he found it ironic that just a few months earlier the UFC tried to book him against Armen, and Armen said no. Yet suddenly, for a grappling match, Armen was ready. Gamrot called it a funny situation, but ultimately made it clear that the octagon is where their business belongs. He said both of them deserve to fight in the UFC, and once that's done, they can grapple or do whatever else afterward. Right now, Gamrot is sitting at number 8 in the rankings, while Armen still holds on to the number 2 spot. On paper, that gives Armen leverage, but the problem is, by refusing opponents the UFC actually offers, he risks losing momentum and even the UFC's support. Armen has continued to insist on fighting a bigger name, mentioning guys like Dan Hooker or Paddy Pimblett as potential options. But according to reports from Red Corner MMA, the UFC already seems to be pushing Armen toward a matchup with Hooker. Word is that Armen versus Hooker is being lined up for UFC Qatar this November. If that fight does happen, it could be a make-or-break moment for Armen's standing in the division. The situation really highlights the thin line fighters walk when chasing a title shot. Armen wants a bigger name to justify his number 2 ranking, but at the same time turning down fights against dangerous contenders like Gamrot and make him look like he's avoiding challenges. Meanwhile, Gamrot continues to push for the fight to happen inside the UFC, not in grappling, not in exhibitions, but in the octagon where it counts. At the end of the day, Armen's choices have left fans questioning his direction. Instead of building momentum, he's caught in a cycle of declined fights, confusing negotiations, and now the strange grappling offer that backfired. Whether the UFC books him against Hooker, Gamrot, or someone else entirely, Armen needs a decisive performance soon to regain control of his narrative. Otherwise, he risks being seen as a fighter who talks about big opportunities but hesitates when they finally come his way. Move on to another news. Charles Oliveira recently sat down with Ariel Helwani and opened up about a number of important topics, including his upcoming fight with Rafael Fiziev, the reasons behind the Max Holloway rematch falling apart, and the constant speculation surrounding his retirement. After suffering a brutal knockout loss to Ilya, where he was put out cold for the first time in his career, many fans and analysts wondered if that was the end of the road for the former lightweight champion. But Charles made it crystal clear he is not retiring. He's still motivated, still hungry, and still chasing big fights at lightweight. The Holloway rematch was something a lot of people wanted to see. Their first fight ended without a clear conclusion, and with Holloway's incredible win over Dustin Poirier just weeks after Charles' knockout loss, the timing seemed perfect. The hype was there, The storyline was there, and fans were buzzing about it. But Charles explained why that fight didn't happen. He revealed that after Holloway broke his hand, things got delayed, and he personally didn't want to sit around waiting. He wanted to get right back into action, and since Fiziev was available, the UFC moved forward with that matchup. Charles also made it clear that a fight with Holloway could still happen in the future. He believes it's a matchup fans want, and he's not closing the door on it. For now though, the focus is fully on Fiziev. The two are set to clash on October 11th, and stylistically this is an explosive fight. Fiziev is considered one of the most dangerous strikers in the division, a technical powerhouse with knockout power in both hands. Charles, on the other hand, has built his career on relentless pressure, dangerous stand-up, and some of the best jiu-jitsu in MMA history. What has some fans concerned is the timing. Charles is stepping back into the cage only a few months after being completely flatlined by Ilya, and now he's going right up against a striker as lethal as Fiziev. The risks are obvious, but for Charles, this is the path he wants. He's determined to prove that he's still one of the elite fighters at lightweight. During the interview, Helwani also asked about retirement, especially since so many fighters from Charles's era are starting to step away. Dustin recently announced his retirement, and others from that same generation have either slowed down or are talking about calling it a career. But Charles dismissed the idea that he's even close to done. He said he doesn't think about retirement at all. In fact, he feels he's in a good place right now, both mentally and physically. He believes there's still plenty left for him to accomplish in the sport, and plenty more to show the world. Charles emphasized that he's motivated, that he's in a strong phase of his career, and that despite setbacks, he's not going anywhere. He isn't looking to slow down, he isn't looking to fade out quietly. Instead, he's fully locked in on facing dangerous contenders, winning big fights, and keeping his name at the top of the lightweight division. For Charles, retirement isn't even on the radar. The focus is competition, the focus is proving himself, and the focus is leaving behind a legacy that reminds everyone why he's considered one of the most exciting and dangerous fighters of his era. Move on to another news. Dominick Cruz recently shared a wild story with Demetrius Johnson about something that happened more than a decade ago, and it caught a lot of fans by surprise. Back in 2011, Cruz fought Johnson in a fight that went the distance and ended in a unanimous decision. But according to Cruz, there was more to that fight than people realized at the time. He revealed that Dana White actually gave him a GTR worth around $125,000 just for stepping in on short notice. Cruz explained that the situation came together quickly. He had just gone through back-to-back fights with Uriah Faber, and then the UFC approached him with the Johnson matchup. Because it was short notice, the offer came with an unusual incentive. Cruz said they told him, "We'll give you a GTR if you take this fight." At that point in his life, he wasn't making big money yet, and that kind of car was worth more than anything he had ever owned. The GTR was valued at around 6 figures, and for Cruz it felt like an almost impossible decision. He remembered thinking, should I sell this car? Should I keep it? Because it was more money than he had ever had in his bank account at once. At the time, Cruz was living in a small one-bedroom studio apartment, tucked into the back of someone else's property. He described how he was literally sharing laundry space with the family living in front of him. He had to use their washing machine. So imagine the scene: Dominick Cruz, the UFC champion, pulling up to this tiny studio in a $25,000 sports car. Cruz laughed as he remembered the reaction from the neighbors. They immediately assumed he was suddenly making big money and even raised his rent. He said they bumped his rent from $600 to $700 a month just because he pulled up in that flashy car. For Cruz, it was both hilarious and overwhelming. Here he was, barely scraping by, pulling into a small shared property in a car worth more than his entire life savings. Johnson, on the other hand, couldn't believe what he was hearing. He joked in disbelief, saying he never got anything like that from Dana White. "What the f? I never got nothing," Johnson said with a laugh. Reacting to the story, Cruz admitted that he just got lucky with the timing and the circumstances. The UFC needed him to step in, and the car was the way they sweetened the deal. Cruz also looked back on the fight itself, remembering the intensity. He reminded Johnson that he got suplexed multiple times in that fight. "You suplexed me 4 times, Cruz said. before adding that he's long since forgiven Johnson for it. He admitted he still sees the highlight pop up all the time, but it's all love now. For Cruz, the memory of that fight and the insane bonus that came with it will always stand out. It wasn't just another win on his record, it was the time Dana White handed him the keys to a six-figure car, right as he was still living like a broke fighter trying to make it in the sport. The story perfectly captures how crazy things could get in the early days of the UFC, when fighters were still grinding for every opportunity, and unexpected rewards could change their lives overnight. For Cruz, that $21,025 GTR was more than just a car, it was a symbol of the sacrifices he made and the lengths he was willing to go to prove himself inside the octagon. Move on to another news. Dan Hooker has stirred up the featherweight division just weeks out from UFC NOSI. In a recent appearance with Sky Sport, Hooker explained why he believes the winner of Gene Silva versus Diego Lopez should be next in line for Alex Volkanovski's belt, and he didn't hold back when criticizing others in the mix. Hooker flat out dismissed Movsar Evloev and Lerone Murphy, saying nobody cares about them. They're boring, and they don't bring the kind of excitement or attention that Silva does. In Hooker's eyes, Silva is the one with real eyeballs on him, the fighter fans actually want to see. This is an interesting stance, especially because Volkanovski is Hooker's teammate. Volk has been very clear over the years that he doesn't care about popularity, he simply wants to face the most worthy challengers. In fact, Volkanovski has been trying to get the Murphy fight locked in for months because he believes Evloev is the most deserving contender. But Hooker clearly sees it differently. He thinks Volkan deserves the absolute biggest fight possible, and in his eyes that could be Silva if Silva gets past Lopez at UFC NOSA. Hooker doubled down, saying, "I feel like 100% whoever gets their hand raised in this fight will be fighting for a title. These are the most exciting guys in the division." Lopez moves the needle and Silva has been doing an incredible job of building his name. The winner of this fight gets the title shot. He acknowledged that some people might argue there are other contenders, but he wasn't impressed. Murphy, according to Hooker, is simply too boring. He gave him some love as a fighter, but pointed out that Murphy doesn't have the presence on the microphone or the ability to sell fights. "Some fighters just take more time," Hooker said. "But if you don't want to say it with your chest, then no one cares." He didn't stop there. Hooker added that no one is really eager to see Evloev fight either, and when he mentioned Aljamain Sterling, he claimed that the UFC itself doesn't want to push him despite his accomplishments. Hooker still showed respect, calling Sterling's run outstanding, but made it clear the big wigs in the UFC don't favor him. In Hooker's mind, it's simple. The winner of Silva versus Lopez will get the title shot because they bring the kind of excitement and energy that makes fans care. And at the end of the day, Hooker believes that's what matters most.